Hello and welcome to another D&D Stories. I'm your host, TheWriter, and this is a show where I sit here and regale you with all the tabletop gaming stories and remember when something cool happened. So today, we go over to a Crash and Burn campaign. Now and then, it happens to every DM, it happens to every group. Games fall apart, games just stop, or everybody walks away mad, or just different circumstances happen that end a game prematurely, and sometimes it's the DM's fault, sometimes it's the player's fault, sometimes it's both. There could be a lack of communication, but I ain't scared to talk about my failures, so get ready for this, because man, what a ball of fire. This campaign was called Five Towers. It was set in the land of Lorne, where there was one town, Cypress Town, and one capital, Irwinus. There was one road, the King's Arm Road, which was made of red brick, and it took place in this micronation. It was like maybe the size of Virginia. It was a very simple, like early Final Fantasy design, like on a grid. The southern border is mountains, the northern border is forest. The eastern border is ocean, and the western border is like a river, so I built like this box for the campaign to be in. It was not the best setting I ever did design, but the premise was that from Irwinus to the western border was the King's Arm Road, which was made of red brick, and along it were these five towers that were guardsmen's towers as well as toll booths, because the road was like 3 carriages wide. It was basically like a primitive highway almost. And, children could run about with buckets and like rip weeds up from between the bricks and like scrub X number of bricks and then take them to the nearest guard post or whatever and turn in a bucket of weeds for like a silver piece or a copper piece or whatever. It was like the pride of this micronation was this perfect road that they had so that all the tradesmen and merchants could come in and get to Irwinus, which was a big capital city up on a hill, and all the boats that came in and out of Lorne would stop at Irwinus. So it was a great like single, almost like a city state. If a city state had like several hundred miles of influence, but let's meet our heroes, shall we? Because among the 5 towers, which were called the King's Fingers, 5 fingers, 5 towers, these heroes were to stay in the 3rd tower. So they were in the King's middle finger, ha 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 ha. But I only had 2 of them at the time. We eventually added a 3rd person, I think. I've long since forgotten because this is nothing but bad memories, but we're setting up the premise so you can see what I mean. We started out with Simon, a human cavalier, and a cavalier is like a jouster, a horseback swordsman, somebody who's really good at horseback combat, like the beloved of Valerian or cavalry. That's the word I wanted. Cavalry. But we also had the half-orc war priest of Aristil, who is a hunting god, a nature god, Broadwin, who was from Cypress Town, had a son there, was doing her nation proud, doing her duty to go and serve a shift or an enlistment there in one of the 5 towers. And Simon was there to be the knight in shining armor, the big hero guy. And they also ended up with a prisoner servant or an indentured servant named Brunhilda, who was like an older dwarven woman. And now the king, who lives in Irwinus, has a very particular way that he treats prisoners. It's like, yes, you can sit in this big stone box with other people that might rape you or kill you or stab you for wearing the wrong color shoes, or you can go be a servant in one of the 5 towers and like cook and clean and maintain the horses and stuff like that and make something of yourself. So, sit in prison for 20 years or work at one of the 5 towers for 5 years. Yeah. So, she decides she'd rather see the sky and hear the trees and eat good food, etc., etc., than sit in a stone box for 20 years. Now, what was she guilty of? Well, that was never really touched upon, but we'll get to that if we get to it. So, these three people arrive. They've got a big cart of supplies, all the food. They're going to be staying there for like a few months. So they got a couple of horses. Simon's got his charging horse with him. He's got his jousting lance, hooked onto his horse. They've got this big cart of supplies, a couple of, a trio of horses pulling this big heavy thing. Broadwin's sitting up on there kind of like whittling, keeping an eye out as they're going. And they arrive from Cypress Town to serve their enlistment because, Lorm really loves a hero, and all the monsters in this country that are, like, magical in nature come out of the northern forest. So I remember I told you the southern border is mountains and the northern border is forests. Well, that forest is where all the ne'er-do-well magical creatures come out to charge across the road to Cypress Town or the surrounding villages to eat people or livestock or whatever. So all the towns and the people are south of the road, and all the 5 towers are north of the road. So they serve as not only toll booths, but a line of defense against evil monsters and things. So they arrive, and they find this place is really quiet. Like, there's no horses. All the horses are gone. The toll booth portcullis is up and locked in position, so people can just wander by and not pay the toll. They can't hear anything. All the windows are locked up. The door is closed. There's nobody out and about. And they are immediately suspicious. So they wander inside. Brunhilde stays outside because she's, the quote-unquote helpless NPC. She's going to be their cook. So she's got, 10 health and no armor. She's going to stay out of this. Thank you very much. And Simon and Broadwin go inside. And they have a look at this place. And the bottom floor is the kitchen and, dining area. But on the floor is a dead elven woman, and it looks like she's been, sliced at with, a large blade or a hacking knife or something. And they hear something skittering across the floor somewhere, and there's tables, there's chairs, there's barrels and the stove and the countertops, the kitchen island. It's a busy room, but they can hear something skittering around. They're like, oh God, pygmies. I think that was the first word out of Simon's mouth. Oh God, pygmies. And he pulls out his short sword, and Broadwin pulls her bow and arrow like this is going to be a tiny target. But I think she pulled all of the feats for short range bowmanship. All those bonuses you get if you're closer than 30 feet. I think they were playing D&D 3.5. Or Pathfinder, one of the two. And anyway, there's a big handful of bowmanship feats that you can take, and they're level 10, so they're big-time seasoned adventurers. Where you can take a bunch of feats that, the closer you are to something, the better shot you are. It's it's my favorite enemy, and I'm within 30 feet, and I don't have an obstructed view, and my bow's a +1. She stacked and stacked and stacked bonuses. So, though she was a war priest, she was a bow and arrow character. So she could, charge up her arrows with Holy Smite and then shoot something that's, 5 feet away from her, and it would blow up. It was really cool. But they hear something skittering around in the dark, and suddenly Broadwin gets tagged, in the calf, in the back of her leg, with a freaking carving knife. And she wheels around, and she's bleeding down the back of her pant leg, and she turns around, but there's nothing there. Whatever it was skittered away too fast. And Simon's like, I knew it, it's fucking pygmies. You okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Let's just find it. And they turn over some chairs, and they move the table, and they look around the kitchen island. They can't find it. Whatever it is freaking giggling at them like a little kid. And finally they're like, all right, you know what? There's better ways to do this. If it can laugh, it has to breathe. So They barricade the door that leads upstairs. Remember, this is a tower, so each floor is one room. They barricade the door that leads upstairs. They make sure all the windows are securely locked and covered. And then they go back outside, and Simon and Brodwin throw smoke sticks inside. They're going to smoke it out, whatever it is. And they stand outside. Brodwin's got her bow and arrow trained on the doorway, and Simon's ready with his short sword in case something leaps out of the smoke. And they wait. But nothing ever comes out. And the smoke sticks run out, and they kind of look at each other, and they're like, If it laughs, it has to breathe. It must have, like, suffocated, or if it's tiny, maybe it got a lung full of smoke and collapsed. So they wait for the smoke to dissipate, and they go back inside, and they find a gingerbread man with a giant kitchen knife, like, attached to its arm. And they're like, what the fuck is this? And Brodwin picks up the gingerbread man. She, like, crushes it and throws it into the fire under the cauldron, because this is the kitchen, under the cauldron. And they're kind of re-examining this, like, there was a killer gingerbread man. And Brodwin goes over, like, what are these people smoking? She looks in the cauldron. You know, it looks like it's been cooking for days. It's just slop. There's a big rock in there, taking up most of the cauldron itself. They go and they examine this woman. Again, she looks like she got chopped a few too many times. And just, like, bled out on the floor. Like, this gingerbread man must have just, like, jumped up on a table somewhere and, like, got her in the back or something. And they're like, oh, okay, this was supposed to be changing of the guard, but this tower is awfully quiet. So, you know, they unbarricade the door, and they go upstairs, and of course, they find the second floor is like the sleeping quarters. There's 4 beds, it's got all the general amenities, you know, books, wash basin, all that good stuff. And, you know, area rugs. It's the place of comfort, I guess, if you're not on watch or on patrol. And they find a dead dwarven gentleman with a bean plant growing out of his belly button. And they're like, oh my god. And they look at it for a while, and they start kind of to slowly piece this together, like they're sensing a theme. Like, there's a killer gingerbread man, and, you know, there was a big rock in the cauldron, so, oh, it's stone soup, ha ha ha. And, you know, this guy's got a bean plant growing out of his stomach, and it's like, oh, was it magic beans? And they go and they look in the cauldron again. Sure enough, it's like a bean stew, or it was a bean stew, like stone soup kind of thing going on. It's like this. There's like a fairy tale theme going on here. And they go up a little further. They go up to the 3rd floor, which is the stock room. It's full of crates and barrels and boxes and stuff. And they find a young woman, like, leaned up against the wall, like, holding her abdomen, and she's got leaves sticking out of her as well. She's got a big, like, beanstalk plant growing out of her belly button, and she's dead also. And they're like, Jesus Christ. So it's like the magic bean that grew into the beanstalk. Okay, we get it. So Brodwin takes them outside. She's got to do some, like, really nasty, like, visceral surgery to get this out, because the roots are just growing all through their innards. They're dead bodies now, so they're fertile ground once they start rotting and turning into fertilizer. So Brodwin does a really nasty, like, she-orc surgery to rip all this crap out of these bodies, and then they throw them into, like, the fire and they burn them, because, you know, God knows that these beanstalks touch the ground and they turn into giant beanstalks. Well, that's gonna suck. But they burn both of them, and they bring all the bodies outside. They don't recognize them. It's just the people that were there before them. And they go up to the 4th floor, which is the arrow slit room. It's like, you know, if this tower was being used as a defensive structure, you could stay in there, and there's, like, X number of arrow slits where you can face in any compass direction and, like, fire a bow and arrow or a crossbow out of them and have very little chance of getting, like, tagged in return. You know what arrow slits are. But Brodwin, of course, loves this room because it has no proper windows, and she's a bow and arrow character, so there's, like, 12 different arrow slits in this circular room, and there's nothing else in it, not even an area rug, so she could have, like, a crate of arrows or crossbows at the ready. and be able to just shoot out all different windows if a battle happens or if something goes on that they need to defend the fort, you know. And they go up, or they go to the base of the stairs there, and they found what, you know, the dead elven woman, the dwarven gentleman, and then the human lady. So that's 3. I thought there were 4 people, but I don't think so. Yes, there was a 4th guy on the roof, and unfortunately, he was killed in an equally grisly fashion, but looked a little more traditional, like he'd been taken down by a sword, somebody's blade. But on the roof is, scattered everywhere, are broken candles and a ballista that has been broken into pieces. There's ballista bolts that are just shattered every which way. This was clearly sabotage. Like if they set up a siege weapon on top of this tower, somebody came to break it. And they get out and they're looking around. They're trying to see, you know, did it leave claw marks? Was it a dragon? They're looking around. And there's a guy perched on the roof with a pouch full of candles on his hip. And they're like, who the fuck is that guy? And they're like, get him! And Bronwyn, who again worships the hunting and nature gods, summons a celestial lion who jumps and grabs this guy down and yanks him to the fucking ground. And Simon's got his sword, Brunhilde's got her arrows. And you're like, who the fuck is this guy? And they beat his ass. Like, before he even gets any actions, like, he's taken like 80 damage. And what is he said something really stupid. He was like, you gotta be quicker than that. You gotta be quicker than me. Ha ha! And he pulls out a candle and he sets it like on the edge of the tower behind him, and he leaps over it, and like the second that his jump like apexes over this candle, he shoots off into the tree line like a fucking superhero. Like if you remember the old Hulk movies, you know, he doesn't fly, he jumps from fucking one end of the canyon to the other. He leaps into the fucking trees like a superhero and leaves our heroes and the celestial lion standing there slack-jawed. And they pick up the candle and they look at it and they look at each other and they go, Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, Jack jump over the fucking candlestick, and they throw the candle. Fuck that guy. So Jack be nimble lay siege to their tower and got away before they could take him down. And they look at the ballista, it's a lost cause. They look at the ballista bolts, they're a lost cause. It's like, gosh, there's a lot of fairy tale tomfoolery going on around here. You know, we're gonna have to clean out the tower. We're gonna have to make sure everything is like secure before anything else happens. And there's chests on every floor for them to go through. They don't open any of them. They bring all their supplies in. They get Brunhilde, their indentured servant, to come and scrub down the kitchen, make a meal, make sure the horses are okay, etc., etc. The premise for this campaign was going to be tower defense. Like, literally, we live in a tower and we are defending. That's what I told the players beforehand, but it wasn't true. It was a trap. So they built characters in like a Monster Hunter fashion. I don't know if you guys have seen the Monster Hunter games where you fight like giant fucked up dinosaurs and like dragons of all different breeds and colors, and like the whole game is just boss fights. That's the campaign that I kind of advertised to them. But at the same time, I put in the question, you know, why? Why do all these weird monsters, all of which have to do with fairy tales, by the way, from what they've seen so far, why do they keep coming in out of the forest? You know, is something driving them away, or is something, is there some greater force conjuring them, or is there, you know, how does this work? Why do they come boiling in out of the woods to try and destroy Cypress Town, or mangle up the King's Arm Road, or attack caravans? You know, these are all different, completely exotic, giant monsters. Why do they do this? And I got carried away with the why, and the why was not a very good reason, and it destroyed the campaign. So, come with me on this journey. We have risen to the top of the roller coaster, that first hill when you're riding at Busch Gardens. Now we're going to go all the way down. So, below the tower, as you might imagine, was a cellar. It's a root cellar. It's a storage place. You keep extra torches, extra crates of supplies, and barrels of oil for the lanterns, etc., etc. And they're collecting tolls from people that are going by, merchants, large groups of men that are traveling on military exercises, etc., etc. All of them going to Irwinus, but none of them traveling from Irwinus out. So everybody's either getting on boats or they're staying in Irwinus. But they go down to resupply after a while. That's where they left all their crates. And they find a trap door in the basement. So it's like, we have a sub-basement? I didn't know that. So they pull this trap door, and it's a ladder. And they go, oh, what's all this? And they leave Brunhilde in and around the kitchen on the ground floor. She's a servant. She's not going to come with them. She's not a level 10 adventurer like they are. But they go down this ladder, and they find out that basically the entire premise of the campaign is a lie. The reason these are all fairy tale creatures, the reason that things are coming out of the forest to attack the Five Towers to try and get to Cypress Town, is for no other reason than the will of the people. They want heroes that will step forward and bravely fight the monsters to keep people in good spirits and keep them in line, because the king, who is called Magnus, is basically an all-powerful wizard who is controlling the entire region like this diorama. They go down this ladder, and they find a complex that, through lots of notes and steampunk machines and other setting-breaking things, they find out that these monsters are conjured by the Five Towers for them to fight, so that they look good in front of the villagers who worship and follow the king. So there's literally like a wheel of fortune, spin the wheel. Oh, it landed on fucking Jack B. Nimble. Well, now Jack B. Nimble is coming to kill you and use his jump tricks and drop you from 10,000 feet. Or you spin it again, it lands on the gingerbread man. Now the gingerbread man's got a kitchen knife and he's going to fucking stab you in the back. Or, you spin it again, Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. Here comes this beautiful lady with 7 dwarves that are going to beat your ass, etc., etc. It was set up on the premise of showmanship. And Simon and Brodwin look at each other and they go, it's fake. The whole thing is fake. And you could cut this little chain or cut this little rope and the whole mechanism would come apart. And they look at it as there's enough magic powder and this automated system of runes and magic circles and things. It's you could spin the wheel, whatever it lands on, it'll summon that monster in the forest and then give it the driving need to go south and destroy Cypress Town. And in order to get there, it has to pass one of the 5 towers, which is ridiculous because the road is 500 miles long. But the monsters are driven to visit one of the towers first and kill everybody inside it and then go to Cypress Town. So these conflicts always happen. But yeah, they're set on, it'll pick a random number of days. It'll pick a number 1 through 30. And then on that day of the month, it'll conjure a monster and send it your way. It's the whole thing's fake. It's a mechanism. And Brodwin kind of strokes her chin for a while, and I'm like, yes, this is the part where they ruin the mechanism and they start wondering why. They did not ruin the mechanism and start wondering why. They left it the way it was, and Brodwin started speculating, gosh, we could rig the fights. Because anytime they kill a monster, they get paid for it, plus the pay that they're there to do guard duty and take tolls from people, etc., etc. They get mail from Irwinus congratulating them on their monster kills, etc., etc. But there's no reason for it. It's all fake. And they start wondering about this because this is a micronation. It's very small. It's probably about the size of Virginia. It's very small for a country. And Simon and Brodwin and Brunhilde are sitting around the dinner table one day and like, well, we could rig the fights and just keep making great money, and don't rock the boat. This is a standard like utopia almost. We could just keep all the really nasty monsters at bay because we can spin the wheel and have it stop where we want it to instead of just the mechanism spinning the wheel, and it could land on something terrible like Smaug from Lord of the Rings, or freaking any other like really nasty fairy tale monsters like the Wicked Witch of the West, or the evil queen from Sleeping Beauty who can turn into a dragon whenever she wants, etc., etc. So they're into it, and I was like, shit. So you have plan A, you have plan B, and the players will always choose plan C because they're players, and that's what they do. As a DM, you can't plan for everything. But it got to the point where they went through that dungeon complex under the tower, and they didn't touch anything. They opened all the doors, they looked at all like the piping with glowing blue water inside. They saw elementals that were like held in stasis that were powering the whole thing, release me. Oh, we walk by, we don't touch it. They went through this entire, and I was so mad. Because when you design a whole dungeon and your players don't want to touch anything or mess with anything, they don't want to open the chests or throw the levers or open the doors or release the elementals or do anything. They literally mapped the place and they left. And I was so mad. I was like, well, okay. So after a while, they decide, okay, we need to set up watches. And because if Magnus, the king of Lorne, finds out that we know his little charade, he might send something nasty to come after us. Or he could strike us down with lightning. No doubt he's a 20th level wizard or something like that. But they set up a watch, and Brodwin is like out on top of the tower. And just kind of like watches the road. She looks at the forest. She watches the road. She looks at the forest. And in the middle of the night, a little boy in just a loincloth, I'll let you guess who that is, runs out onto the King's Arm Road. He's got pencil and some charcoal. Or he's got paper and some charcoal. And he runs out into the middle of the road in front of the tower. And he looks around for a little while. And he kneels down and he puts the paper on the brick. And he starts like making a rubbing on the brick. And then and Brodwin's like, who the hell is that? Some kid from Cypress Town. And she pulls an arrow on this little kid. And she like fires a warning shot. And it goes tink off the side of one of the bricks near him. And he freaks out. And he drops the charcoal and he drops the paper and he runs for it into the forest. Because of course. Brodwin chooses not to share this information with Simon. Hey, I saw a creepy little kid in the middle of the night dressed in just an orange loincloth making a rubbing on the street or on the King's Arm Road. Does she go and get the paper? No. She doesn't tell Simon. She doesn't go get the paper. They've still got chests in the tower that they haven't opened. They get mail from Irwinus, the capital. They don't send any mail anywhere asking questions. They actually come into contact with a quote-unquote mad scientist who sends a new ballista to the tower because the old one got smashed. They send a new ballista to the tower, and it comes with a note that says, hello, this is Dr. So-and-so, great inventor extraordinaire. Here is your new ballista. After your old one got smashed, I recall you ordered the new one. This is talking about the people that used to be there. They're dead now. They ordered a new ballista, and it's just now getting there. This is the Dragon Penetrator 9000. Despite its name, do not point it at your crotch. It will hurt a lot. And they unwrap this thing. It's like a big crate and they open the crate, and sure enough, it's a great big ballista. It's got mithril fittings in it, so it's easier to turn. You don't need like 4 people to fucking turn this thing fast enough for it to be of any help in a battle. So one person can run this thing and like turn the crank and put the new ballista bolt in and fire it. So it takes 1 turn to reload this ballista instead of like 3 or 4, because siege equipment takes like a team to use properly, usually. But the Dragon Penetrator 9000, no. 1 person can run it. So they immediately take it upstairs, up to the top of the tower. They throw all the bits of the old ballista off, and they mount this new one, and they put it on like this rotating like Lazy Susan thing, so that Brodwyn, who uses bow and arrow anyway, so yes, of course, she can operate a ballista. Brodwyn can like sit on one side of it and like use her arms to turn the whole thing, and it can point in any direction. So now they've got a thing on top of the tower in case like a dragon comes out of the woods. She can like belt him in the face with a 4d6 ballista bolt. It was really cool. But this was not to be, because over time, plot hook after plot hook after plot hook just kept getting ignored. So the little boy with his rubbing on the road, they never went and got it. There were chests all over the tower. I think there was a treasure chest on every single floor that was locked, and or some of them were actually unlocked. But there were keys around, and they had the keys. They didn't want to go open them. They didn't respond to any mail they got, and in all eventuality, I was like, okay. I basically had to scold them. I was like, guys, there's like 7 plot hooks here. You gotta do something. The paper is gone. You've still got all these treasure chests. You've got mail coming in. There's other towers you can visit. You can visit the forest. Cypress Town is like 6 hours ride from here. And I think part of it was like a bait and switch as like a concept for a campaign. It's like they were expecting monsters to come to them so that they could show off their jousting ability and their giant ballista and stuff. But the plot was moving along that I was going to keep dropping hints that not only is this mechanism with the 5 towers and the monsters that get conjured up, not only is that fake, but everything else is fake too. Like if they had pulled up the front yard, it would have been like you pull back like 3 or 4 inches of like of grass and roots and stuff, and then under that is like a clockwork mechanism. Even the ground on which you stand is not real. What fuckery is this? And just slowly reveal this greater and greater mystery that they're not really in a country, they're in like a diorama. Like everything about this place other than themselves and the people in Cypress Town, all of it's fake. Magnus, the king in Irwinus, has such a tight control on the fucking weather, on what kind of monsters attack, on what sort of heroes man his towers, on what crops are, on what kind of wildlife, everything. It's almost like the Matrix, if the Matrix were in medieval times. If they had looked around more, they were like, nothing about this place is natural. It's all pre-planned, it's mapped out, it's geometric, it's set in such a way that it's like clockwork. It's like a clockwork country. It looks normal until you start pulling at the seams, and then you realize all the gears and ugly machines that are running the candy factory. Willy Wonka can make it cool and whimsical as he wants, but my gosh, all those OSHA violations are going to get people killed. So after like 5 or 6 plot hooks failed, I was starting to get really fucking frustrated about like where this campaign was going. I was like, okay, I don't want to step up and be like, guys, okay, Brodwyn, go out there and get the piece of paper that the little boy was making a rubbing on the street there. Simon, go open all the chests that are in the tower. You've got the keys. None of them are beyond your reach. Go next door, go to the second tower or the fourth tower, see if they have similar mechanisms under their towers. And it's like they wanted the campaign to come to them, and I kept dropping plot hooks and interesting things, and they just ignored all of it. And I was like, fuck, what do you want? I mean, yeah, I can make a dragon come sauntering in out of the forest. You can spin the wheel and fight whatever fairy tale monster you want, because that's literally what's going on. But they kept waiting for things to happen, and things were not happening. So it was very frustrating for both sides. Now, my original plan, and yes, I know, this whole campaign was based on a bait-and-switch utopia project, and why would you tip the boat? I get it. Hindsight's 2020. What was supposed to happen, I had several plans. Either A, they would try to leave Lorne. They would go west and go past the other two towers to the river and then try to cross the river. Now, once they got there, they would realize that there's nothing beyond the river. It's just a nothing, an abyss. And they would realize that they were living in a pocket dimension. That the entire nation of Lorne is a pocket dimension like the size of Virginia. It's massive. And, trying to leave, they would realize that this world is extremely limited. It's like a disk world or a floating island or whatever you want in the endless abyss of whatever, with an atmosphere and a sun and a moon that no doubt Magnus also controls. But the other plan is they go east and see where all these people that are coming up the road are going. Because if there are people like warping into this dimension, they're probably here for Magnus to either stop him or take him prisoner, or get him out. And what sort of philosophy is that? What kind of man is Magnus that he decides that he needs to hide away from the rest of the world to create his own little diorama kingdom, to stay away from the real world? What happened to him? Is he hiding? Did he lose a loved one? Could he not stand the way the world works in real life, so he made his own? All these interesting questions. What kind of man is the king if he makes his own world, big though it may be, to hide away from the real world? What kind of man is Magnus, the Wizard King? And they would get curious and go east to Irwinus, which was up on like a hill or a mountain. So they would find all the different layers of defense that are up on the capital. You're supposed to be at one of the 5 towers. You cannot come in here. And then they could breach the castle walls and go up through the streets and go up through the castle and go to the top of the tower and confront Magnus, etc., etc. They're basically going to go talk to God. That was kind of the Persona 5 or the Persona 4 plot that I kind of laid out, is eventually they would go climb a tower and ask God what was going on, or the rough equivalent. Magnus is powerful enough to make his own country, so he's the god of this tiny universe. So they would go and talk to God and see what was going on. But no, they didn't want to do that either. So the campaign basically fell apart because they were into it. Brodwin wanted to rig the fights so that they could keep getting money and buy more magic items and do their jobs more effectively, or rig the fights in such a way that they would always win. So, they would fight like Bambi, or they would fight Cinderella, or any of the other like really easy kills that come from fairy tales. Beauty and the Beast, well, that would be an interesting fight. I'm sure we could take him, stuff like that. And then the campaign went nowhere. And finally I threw my hands up and I'm like, guys, this is over. I gave you like 6 or 7 plot hooks and you're not touching anything in the dungeons. You don't want to go anywhere. I'm done. I could put my efforts elsewhere because it's just not working. So the campaign fell apart pretty hard. I went away really mad, really salty. It took me a long time to like sit and really think about it and philosophize for a while. I was like, well, yeah, they didn't have any reason to change the status quo. They live in a utopian micronation where they can rig their own jobs to be easy, get lots of money, get lots of magic items, and continue to grow stronger. They don't want to go mess with God, because what if he just strikes them down with lightning? I mean, he's a 20th level wizard. I'm sure he could do that. What chance do we have? So why should we, don't look a gift horse in the mouth? We got a pretty good situation going. So they completely ignored their call to adventure for like the existential adventure, like the whole world's fake. Why? What is the real world like? We should go complain to Magnus to be set free, or to fight him and take over this world and get all the people out into the real world. No. So I had planned for A, B, C, and D, so of course they chose E, which was to do nothing and to keep rolling with this situation the way it is. So again, going back to the Matrix, is like we never free a mind once it's reached a certain age. Well, I guess we never free an adventurer once they find their job is easy. So there's only two paths in an adventure. There's the easy way and the right way. And the way to a short adventure is to take the easy way, because the easy way, the only reward is that it's easy. So if you go and decide to stand up to God, or break into God's house and ask him why he's hiding from the real world in this clockwork diorama pocket dimension of fakery, if you don't want to do that, well then just go live your life. There's no campaign. There's no adventure for you here. Sorry. So that campaign crashed and burned pretty hard, and I learned a lot of things, as you do when things go this poorly. This and Bottled Dragon's Roar, that episode we had a long time ago, whenever I base campaigns around like a bait and switch, like I tell my players one thing, but really something else is about to go on, it always blows up in my face, and you'd think I'd learn from that, but I just didn't. So I think far more carefully about how I structure my campaigns these days, because Five Towers was a lot of effort for nothing. I got nothing out of it. They didn't want to touch anything in the dungeons. They didn't want to leave. They didn't want to talk to God. They thought they were sitting pretty where they were in this utopian diorama. So hey, why rock the boat? So there's no adventure there. Well, I hope you will take some of my mistakes to heart. I know I did. My God. I always take campaigns like this with a serious grain of salt. And I did. I walked away mad. I blamed them for everything. But I do realize 90% of it was my mistakes. It was like, I told them I was going to give them like a Monster Hunter tower defense game. And I brought them the world is fake and the king is like God. Let's rock the boat kind of campaign. So it's not what they built their characters for and not what they were expecting. So it spun its wheels for like 3 or 4 sessions, and I was like, okay, I'm done. We're done. And we parted ways, and that was just kind of it. So I hope you learned something. I hope you gleaned some wisdom out of that. I know I did. And I will see you guys on the next D&D Stories. Keep gaming.
Hi guys, T here. Remember to hit that like button for me on your way out. If you'd like to see artwork and maps from my gaming table, check out the D&D Stories Facebook page. Also, I have a Patreon if you'd like to toss a few gold pieces into your humble bard's hat. Links in the description below. Keep gaming!